deserves a comeback.
Live from the Southeast England branch of Outer Heaven, it's the Pixel Empire discussion, episode 2. Welcome back, everyone. It was quite a pleasure making the first episode, I must say, and judging by the positive feedback and myriad of answers I got from the Twitter discussion, you guys also enjoyed it. So it's time for TPE discussion 2, Electric Boogaloo. Now this one concerns which Dormant series deserves a comeback, which hopefully will be both interesting and sadly a bit depressing at the same time. Now there's a number of reasons why a game series could go dormant, whether it be a lackluster sequel, publisher losing interest in supporting the property, or just completely neglecting an IP. Nonetheless, when a game series sort of goes so long without a new installment, you forget they exist, it's, a bit sad. I've come up with 4 of my own picks, 4 of which I think are all very strong contenders for games which deserve another go around, and you guys once again delivered and submitted a crap ton of answers. So I'm also going to be reading some out at the end. Now, my sort of theory of long dormant is roughly around the 10-year sort of mark. So like Alien Isolation not having a new game since 2014, I wouldn't really say that's long dormant, but yeah, so hopefully that sort of sets out the groundwork, and I say let's just get going. So my first pick really baffles me, not only because I'm a huge fan of this series, but there's just so much sort of potential for this series to come back and make a big splash in the new sort of consoles, and that's Time Splitters. There was basically 3 installments on the PS2, and then I think 2 and Future Perfect also on the Xbox and GameCube, and for my money, they were 3 of the best console first-person shooters of the 6th gen, particularly 2 and Future Perfect, which I sunk so much time into on the Xbox. I absolutely adored both games. And they're not only were they excellent single-player games with enjoyable campaigns and tons of arcade potential with medals and sort of unlockables to earn, but they were also incredible multiplayer games, which makes it all the more strange why, in the current kind of game climate where online multiplayer has become so prevalent, that Time Splitters has never mounted a comeback. Now, that's not to say they didn't try, because there were murmurs of a Time Splitters 4, but due to reasons such as Free Radical struggling with both Haze and a cancelled Star Wars Battlefront 3, Time Splitters 4 just never got off the ground, and the development studio of Free Radical, who were made up of former Rare employees, would sadly get shuttered in 2014, and staff would be moved to Dambuster Studios to work on the absolutely poisonous Homefront IP, including the quite average Homefront Revolution, although the interesting thing about that game is that it had a little arcade machine with 2 levels from Time Splitters 2. A nice little homage to the former devs' sort of work, but nothing's really come of it since. Now, in another interesting twist, the IP's been picked up by THQ Nordic, who seem to be hoovering up every IP possible, and they've already sort of stated that they'll want to work with this series. And for my money, that's awesome, because I'd love to see a new Time Splitters on the current consoles, because not only are console shooters more prevalent now, but digital distribution is a viable way of sort of selling your game. So there's no risk of this boxed production malarkey, which really halted Crytek from making a new Time Splitters, because apparently there wasn't a character they could put on the main cover, despite the fact the 3rd game had a main character on the front cover. Yeah, I didn't get that logic either. I mean, there's lots of modern elements that could be integrated, including online multiplayer, of course, which was a feature in Time Splitters 3, but sadly is not available anymore as far as I'm aware. Campaign co-op is another option, and although it's a dangerous phrase to say, even Battle Royale. I mean, why not? Time Splitters could be the most fun Battle Royale game out there. And, it just makes no sense why this charming gallery of wacky, time-travelling antics and characters has never managed to make a comeback. and I think the time is right now. And hopefully with THQ Nordic picking up the IP, this is actually quite feasible, so we'll have to cross our fingers and wait and see. My second pick is a little known but absolutely fantastic platforming series known as Klonoa. Namco would put their first Klonoa game out in around 97, I think, and its daughter Phantomville, which was just superb, almost top to bottom, absolutely excellent, and its sequel, Lunetia's Veil, was even better. I'd say it's one of my all-time favourite PS2 games. But sadly, despite having an adorable main character and oodles of quality, the series just has never done very well commercially. Like, the last game was a Wii remake of Klonoa in 2009, and unfortunately it performed very poorly, much like all of his games, bless him. And I think Namco just cut their losses and ran, which I can't fault them for, because, you know, if you were putting money in a failing business, it would be stupid to keep doing that because, well, it's not getting you any money back. But I think Klonoa quite possibly came at the wrong time, because despite his excellent games, 2.5D platformers were sort of not well looked upon when Klonoa came out on PS1 and PS2. But now, we've had a lot more presence of these 2.5D platformers thanks to the rise of digital gaming and indies, and I think that makes Klonoa's return quite viable. Now, because the thing is, back on the PS2 when Klonoa 2 came out, he had competition from the likes of Jak and Daxter and Ratchet and Clank, fully 3D games, which sort of just blew everyone away. And I think, despite how excellent Klonoa 2 is, some people would probably take one look at the 2.5D perspective and go, why would I want to play this? It's just nights into dreams, and it's not 3D. But I think that misses the point, really, because it's an excellent, excellent series. And, I mean, despite some weird spin-offs, like, for some reason we got a Klonoa volleyball game, which could be the greatest or worst thing ever. I haven't really played it, so I can't tell you. But, yeah, despite some excellent games, Namco just don't seem to be interested in bringing the little critter back. But they haven't quite cut the cord completely, because he's made cameos in other Namco games, including quite a recent foray to the Vita in Tales of Hearts R. So I don't think they totally want to cut the line with him, but equally, he hasn't had a game in what could be 10 years. So something is sadly a remiss with him. But the thing is, there's so many different ways to approach making a game now. You have the digital only option, which arguably could be more financially sort of viable. And, you know, despite the series' completely uneven sales records, I think he's due a comeback, especially with how successful indie games and digital games can be these days. Look at Hellblade. Hellblade didn't get a physical release till months after it came out, but the fact is, it didn't feel like a downgrade from sort of disc AAA games. Give that sort of approach to Klonoa, and I think you could have an excellent platformer right in your hands. So come on, Namco, do it. Now, my third pick's definitely not an original choice, but it's one which a lot of people share a passion for, and I think it's with good reason, and that's Dino Crisis. This Capcom franchise is a strange one to look at because it started as a survival horror, as it saw Regina navigate through a facility of lizard monstrosities using tank controls and traditional survival horror archetypes. The second game then went for more of an arcade action experience where you'd get points for killing dinos, they'd respawn, but you could buy ammo. It was a strange sort of pitch, but it worked so well. It was a fantastic action game. And between that and the third game, we did even get a Gun Survivor spin-off, which I can't really judge because I've not played, but I've heard it's fairly middling. And unfortunately, the third game made the cardinal mistake that a lot of horror film franchises do, and it never usually ends well, and it took the series to space. and unfortunately that game was critically panned and has featured on a bevy of worst sequels lists in the preceding years. Unfortunately, Capcom have left this series extinct as a result, which I think's a pity, because one bad game has never stopped them from making more Resident Evil games. I mean, Christ almighty. Now, this isn't a hopeless one either, as Capcom have revived interest in survival horror games with its remake of Resident Evil 2 this year, which was a fantastic reimagining of the series as we knew it. And I'd say now is the perfect time to strike while the iron is hot. So whether they do a remake of the older games, whether they do a reboot, or whether they even straight port it, which they have done in some instances in recent years, I think Capcom would be foolish not to take advantage of this series' cult following and bring it back. I mean, they've redone and reduxed so many games recently, from Mega Man, Onimusha, to bloody Resident Evil, of course, and I just don't see why Dino Crisis shouldn't also be up for this treatment. The other thing to note is, while the popularity of dinosaurs has sort of swayed over the years, Jurassic World and its sequel have proved both quite popular, proving there is somewhat of a desire to keep fighting and watching people fight dinosaurs despite them being extinct for billions of years. And yeah, I think that just all adds up to a nice incentive to get Regina and her red hair back into the gaming scene. So come on, Capcom, don't disappoint. Announce a new Dino Crisis at E3. I'm begging you. My fourth pick is a series which really has me scratching my head as to why it's been absent, and that's Siphon Filter. This series spans 3 PlayStation consoles as a first-party exclusive, with the PS1, PS2 and PSP all receiving their own games. The first 3 on PS1 in particular are held in high regard by a lot of gamers, well, except GameSpot, who rated 2 and 3, I think, 6 point something, and I'm just like, really? But yeah, a lot of gamers have a special place in their heart for this series, and while Omega Strain on the PS2 didn't really set the world on fire, the 2 PSP installments also were really well received, and are often regarded as 2 of the better games on the console. So why has this series been dormant since 2007? It's been in ghost mode for 12 years, and it completely leaves me scratching my head. You can't blame it on sales. All 3 of the PS1 games went platinum, and the 2 PSP games sold really well as well. And it's not as if the developer's defunct, because Sony Bender's still alive and well, with them making a game as recently as April with Days Gone on the PS4. And you can't say it's due to negative opinions, because really the only bad installment is Omega Strain. So what happened? And it's really baffling to me, because while the games came out and were really well reviewed, they came at a time where third-person shooters hadn't really found their mojo on consoles. But once we hit the PS3 gen, the third-person shooter became the norm. And, you know, Siphon Filter, with a revamped third-person shooting engine and sort of traditional elements of stealth, really could have been fantastic on the PS3. When you consider the power of the console, why we didn't get a PS3 Siphon Filter, I'll never know. And the other thing is, there's a real void of stealth games at the minute, with Metal Gear Solid assumedly done after Kojima fled Konami, and Splinter Cell missing in action as well. Now, this is a slight spoiler for Days Gone, so you might want to skip ahead if you don't want this to be ruined for you, but Days Gone did have some Siphon Filter Easter eggs, which sort of teased a return, and I guess that means there is hope, but at the same time it could just be Sony Bend acknowledging their past. But you never know. Let's have our fingers crossed that Gabe Logan comes back one day. Right, let's take a look at some user picks now. First comes from @GameTripper. Matt says, had a think, Katamari, Bushido Blade, Gex, SSX, and James Pond. Some great picks there, absolutely. I would love a new Bushido Blade game. If you don't already, by the way, please go follow Matt at Game Tripper. He's runs a site where people can discuss games, not so much from a critical perspective, but what the games mean to you. So I did a piece about Crash Bandicoot 3 Warped being my first game and what it meant to me. And there's some truly excellent stuff on there from a variety of contributors. Next up, it's at Jewel Knight Jess, who says, would love a proper new wave race game, also SSX, F-Zero and Twin B. Again, some great picks there. Another vote for SSX. Come on, EA. You can do it. Next up, it's at SpectrumBots42, who lists Power Stone, Knights, Wario Land, Last Blade, Burnout, Rayman, Banjo, and Twisted Metal. I'd love a new Burnout game. It's a crying shame, really, but I think EA are just not going to bother. Next is Very Deadbeat, who says, Siphon Filter is the big one for me. It's scandalous how this series hasn't had a release since the PSP. I wouldn't mind Duke Nukem making a return, as the last installment was just awful. Can't leave it like that. Also Tenchu, because Tenchu. Well, I can't argue with that last point. Yeah, Siphon Filter, man. I just don't get it. It so deserves a comeback. And Duke Nukem, you know, people crap on Duke Nukem a lot. And yeah, Duke Nukem Forever was pretty hot garbage. But the Duke Nukem 3D was really a good game back in its day. And, you know, it's a shame because you almost feel like, give it another chance, maybe take a different approach aside from being offensive as balls, and it could have been really good, but there you go. At Saki Hayes says, Nightmare Creatures, F-Zero, Pilot Wings, and Beautiful Joe. I'd love a new Beautiful Joe. That game was absolutely super. You know, all of those picks are great as well. And last but not least, at Free Wojis, I hope I pronounced that right, has simply tweeted a picture of Jak and Daxter. So I guess you want a new Ratchet and Clank then. But no, seriously, yeah, I'd love a new Jak and Daxter. It's a shame, really. The series seems to be sort of on ice ever since Naughty Dog moved on to Last of Us and Uncharted again. But never mind. I think we'll leave it there for now. But thank you everyone again who tweeted at me with their most wanted returns. And I hope you enjoyed this episode. I had a lot of fun doing it again. Don't forget, if you want more reviews, think pieces and discussions, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell, and you'll be notified when you get new ones. And also don't forget to check out thepixelempire.net for all games, all eras, in context. I'll catch you guys soon. Take care.